a close friend who happened to be the greatest public intellectual in the American empire in the latter part of the 20th century, who happened to be Palestinian too. That cuts against the grain in the history of the USA. But also, anytime I get a chance to speak out against any crime against humanity, and I do consider the vicious Israeli occupation, the precious Palestinians, as a crime against humanity. It's a moral issue. I speak as a revolutionary Christian, so it's a moral issue, it's a spiritual issue. I think any occupation, be it Tibet under the Chinese, if it were Jews under anybody, I would be here too. It's a moral and spiritual issue. And this is what America and the world need to come to terms with. You all have a sense of what happened at the UN yesterday with the raising of the flag, trying to keep visible the plight and predicament of a significant slice, a crucial slice of humanity, Palestinians. But we live in a world in which Palestinian lives matter so little. Just like I come from a people in the belly of the American empire, in which red lives matter so little, black lives matter so little, poor people's lives matter so little. And it was precisely this common ground that brought Brother Edward Said and myself together. It was 1977 that I first met Edward Said. I wanted to attend his lecture. I had read his masterpiece, Beginnings. I had already read his Harvard dissertation. But I had to meet this Edward Said because I could tell he was a dynamo. I said, my brother, we need to spend some time together. And he was so kind. He realized now, 23 years old, black brother, New York City, straight from Cambridge, Palestinian brother teaching. We came together, and we remain together. I recall when he sent me the manuscript of Orientalism, I said, you've written a masterpiece, but I'm still listening for the voices of the dominated. You're too obsessed with the dominators. You come from an education that looks top down. I come from an orientation that's bottom up. So I want to know what the counter voices are, the counter forces are in the constitution of this deeply dehumanizing discourse called Orientalism that would devalue and demean the rich humanity and decency of those constituted outside of the West as Orientals on the east side of the globe. He said, I appreciate that critique, brother. I got another book coming. He told me, so, well, you know, Noam Chomsky wrote me a letter very similar like that. He was very critical of that text. And I still have Brother Edwards' letter to me. And I say this not in order to somehow elevate myself in relation to him. I'm just a fellow freedom fighter. We don't compete with each other. I come from the black tradition that says lift every voice, whatever your voice is. But it's only your voice, like your fingerprint. It is distinctively and uniquely yours. And Edward Said had a very distinctive and unique voice. He was the last great humanist intellectual in the American empire. And by humanist, what I mean is those who go back to the legacy of Athens on the one hand, Jerusalem on the other, burying and burial, and the very act of burying, which is a displacement, that generates mourning and the need for the objectifying of grief, connected to memory, which is tied to language. But first and foremost, guttural cries, wrenching moans, and visceral groans that are transfigured into language. In the Talmud, where they say the fundamental human responses to deep suffering is first tears, then silence, then song. And it's no accident that for Vico, the first human language was poetic language linked to music. And Edward, of course, the great musician that he was, how do we deal with suffering in our brief move from our mother's womb to tomb? Short trek, trying to come to terms with our sense of what it means to be human. And so for Edward Said, as a humanist intellectual, following Vico, but going back to Athens and specifically going back to Socrates, Socrates was a hero for my dear brother Edward Said, because Socrates embodied the willingness to interrogate, to criticize, to call into question, and that's also what Edward wanted to do. Socrates says philosophy itself is a meditation on and preparation for death. Philo, Sophia, love of wisdom, philosophy. A lover of wisdom is one who is preparing for wrestling with forms of death. But as a humanist intellectual, Edward Said understood that you have to learn how to die in order to learn how to live.